Thank you all for joining us. We have a really great crowd here today. I'm sure you're all looking forward to what's coming in 2015, and as are we. And we're excited to bring these predictions to you. This is particularly timely, I think, because if you're an NFL football fan like myself, you've undoubtedly seen the marketing campaign from the folks up in Milwaukee about the fact that they invented light beer and it changed the world. Now, I might dispute on how much it changed the world, but you can't argue that light beer did fill a need, right? It gave people the same great beer taste with a lot less calories and yada yada yada. It might not have been a perfect solution for everyone, but it did fill a need. And when we talk about something like digital asset management light, what we're talking about here is the filling of a need for some basic digital asset management functionality. Now, we've been talking about DAM Light for a number of years, but in past years, we've been talking about how vendors such as web content management vendors and vendors like enterprise content management vendors have been offering some basic digital asset management services, or what we call DAM Light. And so when people come to us and ask us, should I buy a digital asset management system, we're often looking at it and saying, do you truly need a full-blown digital asset management system, or will DAM Light suffice from another type of vendor, like a web content management vendor or an enterprise content management vendor? And so while that's nothing new, what is new is we have seen digital asset management vendors start to take notice here and say, well, our systems are extraordinarily powerful when it comes to the more complex digital asset management services, like complex workflows, complex collaboration functionality, transformation, transcoding, you name it. But we're being challenged by now web content management vendors, enterprise content management vendors, and a whole slew of other kind of vendors like cloud file sharing vendors like Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive and Box and Dropbox. So what we're predicting in 2015 is that the digital asset management vendors say, hey, we can cater to this use case as well, and we can provide you with the basic services that you may need. And so it's as critical as always when looking at digital asset management vendors to really understand where their strengths lie. And what we're showing here on this screens are the 14 different use cases that we think digital asset management systems today tend to specialize in, and what you'll often find, as with any of the vendors that we cover, a single vendor will be strong in some areas and weaker in others, and it's about finding the scenarios that best align with what it is you're trying to do, and finding the vendors that are particularly strong in those areas. And what we're predicting here is that some of these vendors will pay more attention to the basic brand management capabilities, or the basic library and simpler asset management capabilities, while maybe not putting as much investment into some of the more complicated use cases. Prediction number 2, and this is that hybrid enterprise content management will come of age. Now, regardless of what industry you're in or what size company you're in, everyone is thinking about what is the best way for our organization to utilize the cloud. People are asking, should we go to the cloud via pure software as a service options? Should we restrict any systems from going to the cloud, and should we keep everything in-house? But that's typically a false choice of either going cloud or not going cloud. And there's really a third option that's not a new option. Certainly, in enterprise content management systems in particular have been advancing this conversation over the last few years. But there's an option called, what we're calling the hybrid option, where you might have some content and some functionality be housed on-premise or in private clouds, and some content and functionality out in maybe public clouds, or a combination of either. And so what we're predicting for 2015 is that the hybrid solution from enterprise content management vendors in particular, and some cloud file sharing vendors, will finally come of age and really be able to put together an offering that really can meet the needs of many organizations and give the organizations the right amount of security and flexibility that they're looking for. So it's really we feel like in 2015 hybrid ECM will have its day in the sun. Prediction number 3. HR will rejoin the digital workplace conversation. And I think this is a really positive sign in the right direction. In fact, this morning I was on a bunch of stakeholder interviews with a client that we're working with about defining their future digital workplace. And it was very heartening to see various members from the HR department have a seat at the table here. And what we mean by this is that finally, people have been thinking about the digital workplace and what encompasses the digital workplace for some time, but oftentimes the employee themselves gets left behind. And what we're seeing as a trend here is that HR will finally become that employee advocate when it comes to the digital workplace. And so one of the things we've done in late 2014 that we'll be talking a lot about in 2015 is we developed this employee-centered digital workplace reference model that we hope helps advance these conversations. And what we've tried to do, as you'll see here, is put the employee really at the center of the conversation and try to understand what the employee wants. And we tried to boil it down to some real basic needs and wants of the employee in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, ease of use, and obviously all employees want some professional growth and recognition for their work. But we encourage you to look at this, start it at the employee, and work your way out through these concentric circles, and pay particular attention to the band in blue. And those are the specific applications that you can deliver to your employees. And what we've found is, it's really great to have HR as an employee advocate come to the table, as opposed to the alternative, which has been the traditional way of looking at this, where IT folks and even some intranet owners saying, well, we need social, or we need productivity tools, or we need unified communications, which are really system-centric approach at looking at this problem. But when we kind of flip that model and start thinking about it from the employee first and really particular applications within those categories, that becomes a much more valuable conversation and a much more valuable end state when it comes to defining what that digital workplace should really look like. Okay, prediction number 4. Enterprise social. We are predicting when it comes to enterprise social, there's going to be a lot of hype around unified enterprise messaging. And so when we talk about enterprise social, and we have been talking about enterprise social for quite a long time, this is one of our research streams that Tony mentioned when he started out the webinar. We follow the enterprise social space quite closely, but when it comes to many of these tools, when they entered the market, many of them did so with then they had sort of the traditional way of communicating in their crosshairs. They had an email in particular. I can't tell you how many social software vendor demos and marketing campaigns that I saw that touted themselves as the email killer, if you will. And I think many of the vendors have largely given up the ghost on that particularly strong of a statement, saying they're going to kill email. But what we're predicting in 2015 is that more and more vendors will be coming to the table to say, well, we can be your single system of record for all of your enterprise communications. right? And that includes email. It might include instant messaging. It might include your social and collaboration type areas. It might include your video hangouts, your web meetings, and really any type of communication. They're saying we can do this in one sort of hub, and you can try to consolidate that into one place so that all your communications is happening in one spot. Now, we're predicting there to be a lot of hype in this area. We're not exactly predicting a lot of vendors to pull this off necessarily in 2015, but because this is a really complicated issue that people have been thinking about for many, many years, and there are certainly a slew of security and compliance requirements that need to be taken in consideration that many enterprises don't have appetite for just yet. But I expect a lot of vendor financing and hype to come your way in 2015 about unifying your enterprise messaging. Prediction number 5. Of course, every prediction and trend session that we've had the last few years had to talk about big data, right? And it was just we couldn't ignore it, and that's quite frankly because it is important. But our prediction for 2015 when it comes to analytics and big data is that we think that people within the enterprise, within the digital workplace, will start to pay more attention to what you have in terms of your internal analytics and big data from a variety of different sources. Traditionally we've been talking about big data in the context of external marketing scenarios, and what we're saying in 2015, we'll say enterprises are getting smarter and saying what do we know about our employees, and how can we present them with new experiences based on the data that we have about them. Now, you might say, well, yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We have analytics about our internal employees, but the conversation gets really interesting when you think about the various software as a service HR solutions that exist today that are actually able to aggregate HR data anonymously across many organizations. So there's a real temptation there from many HR folks to say, how can we leverage all of that data and make some smart decisions about what we provide to our employees. And I think that might be a little bit of a stretch when we start to think about all of the possibilities that we have out there. But some of the more savvy organizations are thinking about what do we know about our employees, and as organizations, you do know a lot about your employees. You know what people's roles are. You know their geography. You know that you might even learn their work habits and when they're working. You might know that they're 2 years away from retirement or newly out of university. And because you know so much, combine that with some behavioral analytics or some data trends across the industry, you can make some smart decisions and start to tailor a personalized workplace to your employees, and that's really powerful stuff that we haven't been able to do before. Prediction number 6. So I think those of you who are SharePoint customers or SharePoint followers, you know that SharePoint has released a new version every 3 years. Back in there was the big releases in 2003 and 2007 and 2010. It was a little bit like waiting outside the Vatican for the announcement of a new pope. Everyone was wondering what's in the next release. How is this going to change things for my organization, and is it finally time to invest in SharePoint, or should we upgrade? All these big questions and about what would actually be included in the next release. What we're predicting for the latter half of 2015 is that expectations for the big 2016 next version of SharePoint, we think that it was probably going to disappoint many people, and we're gonna predict that it's not going to be a lot of big surprises here. In fact, what it will largely contain is a bunch of retrofitting, if you will, of SharePoint Online functionality into the on-premise edition, and we'll see maybe we're predicting this this notion of the return of the use of the word portal, which is really the roots of SharePoint, and where it started back in the day was it touted itself as a portal, and then as over the years gotten away from that. But we think that as SharePoint increasingly tries to glue together these lightweight services that are available to you today, we think that Microsoft will actually go back to using the word portal to describe themselves as sort of the glue that pulls all these things together, as opposed to providing these services themselves. So unfortunately, that might not be the exciting thing that all of you are hoping for, but in many cases, it might be okay too, because as we all know, if you've been through the big bang releases of 2010 and 2007, you know that those releases caused a bit of disruption in your organizations, and I know many of you are still struggling to catch up from those big bang releases as well. So maybe the 2016 yawn for SharePoint will be a good thing. Number 7, marketing virtual data warehouses will go mainstream. So again, we're talking about data, because everyone's talking about data. One of the challenges when it comes to data is, how do you actually get good use out of data that you're collecting? Many people find collecting data the easy part, but actually making use of it is really a hard part. And so this prediction is largely coming from some of the work that we've done with some of the leading organizations in the world, some of the biggest commerce and retail companies in the world, who are actually really pretty good at building some virtual data warehouses that are providing a lot of value across their organization. So our prediction is not that these things, that virtual data warehouses will start to happen, but what we're predicting here is that other enterprises are going to start catching up and start building these virtual data warehouses themselves. And so I showed you earlier a reference model we use to describe the digital workplace, but now I want to show you another reference model that we use quite a bit when talking about our external marketing services. And in this model, what we're aiming to show is really some content and engagement management technology at the center of a marketing technology model, and some channels for delivery on the right side with some other layers in between. But what's missing from this model is the data. And what's really gives marketers the power to create optimum user experiences is a combination of having the right content and the right information and data about their clients, about their prospects, about their leads, and really getting a sense of mapping data and content to deliver those optimum experiences. So what I don't want to come across here is that your data warehouse necessarily needs to be one place to go. And I think the key word in our prediction here is that it's the virtual data warehouse that is going to really come of age in 2015. It's not about going to that single place, but rather it's a logically connected and available set of core data that you can have access to and import into different systems to make smart decisions and create optimal experiences. So this model is certainly just meant for reference purposes. Every organization that we work with has bits and pieces of these. Very few look exactly like we have on the screen here. But like I said earlier, the larger organizations, the more global, worldwide organizations that are out there are definitely utilizing the data they have in a marketing, a virtual marketing warehouse, data warehouse, and as well as multiple content and engagement management systems to deliver those optimal experiences.
Hey, Jared,
prediction number 8.
Hey, Jared, before you jump into the next prediction, I just wanted to remind our attendees that they can ask any kind of questions or share their own reactions, comments, agreements, disagreements in the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get to those before the end of the session today. So feel free to ask any questions or share any of your own thoughts via the GoToWebinar control panel in your upper right where it says questions. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming here with Jared.
Thank you. All right, now we're up to number 8. And number 8 is we predict that there'll be a major Drupal split that really characterizes the larger web content management market bifurcation. And so those of you who are involved in the Drupal community and maybe have seen some of the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made in the Drupal community, you already know that there's a pretty big schism that's happened in the Drupal community between we'll call the hackers, if you will, and the people in the community who are more focused on more of the Drupal for the enterprise. And what we're predicting in 2015 is that this schism will really widen into a full-scale divorce. We think this is something that was really inevitable when it comes to a project like Drupal, because what they're trying to do is serve 2 different masters, and unfortunately that's a really, really hard thing to do. And if we look at the larger web content and experience management marketplace, I think this is something that's been happening for quite some time. We've always plotted the vendors that we cover on this spectrum between platforms and products, and platforms in general cater to the more power users of the world and with some much more complicated use cases, whereas the products are tailored to some simpler use cases. And where many vendors have gotten into trouble is they try to do both of these things. Just like Drupal has tried to do. They've tried to have a fully baked out enterprise version that speaks to those power users and have a lighter weight version. Actually, one of our predictions last year was that we would see the rise of the second fiddle CMS, and I think we saw that all throughout 2014. And what we meant by that is many organizations who had invested in the more complicated platforms were also bringing in lighter weight, simpler solutions within the enterprises. So they had multiple CMSs, and I think that continues to be the case as we go into 2015. But we're predicting 2015 we'll see a split in Drupal, and maybe hopefully we'll see some of the vendors getting on this screen getting real to the fact that they can't be both things or all things to all people, and focusing on what they're really truly good at. Prediction number 9. Of course, just like big data in the cloud, we have to touch on mobile. And so from a mobile perspective, we're predicting in 2015 that mobile apps actually get unbundled, especially when it comes to enterprise-focused mobile apps. I think when we're hitting on a second generation wave of web mobile applications, and when we look at the first generation, I think they were largely just scaled down mini-me versions of enterprise applications that already existed within the enterprise. And so when we think of things like we've worked with clients who built HR mobile apps to try to replicate all of their HR systems in one app. And so what we're predicting here in 2015 is that these apps become unbundled as instead of just apps that replicate existing tools, they really focus on a particular specialty or one particular scenario and deliver an optimal experience just for that particular scenario. So the example, instead of creating a full-blown HR app, we see organizations creating a very targeted travel reimbursement app or paid time off app, kind of thing. And while this leads to possibly more apps, and that can be trying as well. But I think what organizations have found is if they can be targeted, they can deliver a much better user experience and help people really accomplish what they need to do without wading through a bunch of unnecessary steps or confusing interfaces. So expect to see more unbundled apps within your enterprises in 2015. And finally, number 10 is that we predict that connected devices will become a more ubiquitous delivery channel. Everyone talks about multi-channel publishing, but typically when we talk about multi-channel publishing, we're talking about publishing to websites and varying mobile phone devices, and of course tablets. Those are the big players when we talk about delivery of experiences. But I was actually talking to someone recently from the National Football League, and he was telling me about how they spent an unbelievable amount of time designing for the tablet for their video content that they deliver on every day of the week, but particularly on Sundays in conjunction with their football games. But he was shocked to find out that their numbers of users on the tablet was actually shockingly low compared to what they were seeing from a Google Chromecast and an Apple TV and a Roku, and of course Amazon has their own connected devices as well. But so we're predicting that in 2015, these players, along with others that we haven't even thought of yet, and of course others that we have thought of, like the Xbox and the PlayStations of the world, these things are becoming ubiquitous, and video broadcasters are certainly thinking of these channels. But maybe you need to think about this as content publishers yourselves, and really seriously putting the needs of people watching and experiencing your brand and your content through their connected devices on their various television screens, and think about optimizing those experiences as well. And it just goes to show we live in a very changing world where we can't just assume there's a fixed end target. It's constantly changing, and we expect in 2015 that the connected device to be a major part of that change. So there's all 10. Let's review. Number 1, DAM vendors will roll out DAM Lite. Number 2, hybrid ECM will finally come of age. Number 3, HR will once again rejoin the digital workplace conversation. Number 4, enterprise social. There'll be a lot of hype around unified enterprise messaging. Number 5, the digital workplace will say hello to analytics and big data. Number 6, we'll be met with a SharePoint 2016 yawn. Number 7, marketing virtual data warehouses will go mainstream. Number 8, we'll see a big Drupal split that will be characteristic of the larger web content management market bifurcation. Number 9, enterprise mobile apps will start to become unbundled and more targeted. And number 10, connected devices will become a more ubiquitous delivery channel. So with that, I will wrap up and say thank you to all of you today for your patience and attention, and I will encourage all of you subscribers that are on the call today, and I know there's a bunch of you. I see a bunch of familiar names on the call. Feel free to go to your library page in your Real Story Group account, and this presentation will be there, but our advisory paper is already there with more detail of the predictions that I went through today. And as always, we encourage you to stay in touch, and feel free to email me at any questions at any time, or reach out via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm happy to keep the conversation. Anything that's up for more further discussion.
Yeah.